You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and today, actually a longtime acquaintance now, Andrea Leigh from the Illume Group. I think we originally met way back at an IRCE conference. I think you were actually talking with Melissa Burdick. Do you remember the Scott Wingo Amazon and Me Day?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I spoke at that. Yeah.
And Chris Perry was there too.
And Eric Heller.
Yeah.
And MB. Yep.
Yeah.
And Jamie Dooley. We were all up on stage together.
Oh, Jamie. I haven't talked with him forever. Yeah. I'll have to, this is a fun start because I remember sitting down, and everybody, we're going to get to the topic in a second. Remember just sitting down at that speaker's table because I was there with not Scott Wingo from Channel Advisor. Oh, man. Another person from Channel Advisor. Shoot, I can't believe I forgot his name. He's going to kill me. He's going to totally roast me for it. Anyways, I sat down at that speaker's table and they came around to get like drink orders, and Eric Heller just ordered for me. I never met the guy before. He's going to take some crazy drink. And I was like, all right. Anyways, he's a fun guy. But anyways, today, originally we were, I was trying to like figure out this organizational strategy, organizational design piece. And when I was talking to Andrea, she was kind of breaking down, it's not necessarily that. And at the heart of it is digital organizations are really struggling. And this is, I'd say, mid to enterprise level. The smaller ones have it more figured out just because they're digitally native and it's more natural and there's fewer people. But if you're at an organization of size, where does everybody fit into the digital sales ecosystem as a whole? And the big answer is it depends, but I do want to kind of pick it apart because you live here. But I'm gonna kick it over to you. If you want to do an intro on yourself, background is super interesting. I'm sure a lot of people have seen you around over the years as one of the OGs in this space. But if you want to kind of give some background and then what you're doing at the Illume Group, that would be awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. And thanks for having me, Aaron. It'll be a fun chat, I'm sure. Well, I really got my career start with my job at Amazon. I started there as a buyer, launching the grocery category. So going to trade shows and telling Snyder's Pretzels circa 2005-06 that we were going to sell pretzels online. And they were like, who's Amazon? That actually happened, by the way. But the only reason
05-06?
Yeah, it was, I started in Amazon in 05 and we launched grocery, I think in 06 or 07. And the only reason I ended up at Amazon was because, well, at first I really wanted to work at Nordstrom and I didn't get the job. So I wanted to be in fashion merchandising, and buying and planning. And I didn't get that job. So, Amazon was, kind of a small, I guess you could call them underdog at the time. But I was intrigued and I loved my interview there. It really felt like a lot of fun. I had come just from business school and it felt like an extension of business school. It was a bunch of people who just finished business school and we were working on cases together, and it felt kind of, it just felt really fun and collaborative. So yeah, I started there. First I started as a senior, product manager, and I ran Harry Potter book launches back when they were print only. And then I was a grocery buyer. And what's so fun about that is like this industry has just, it's a relationship business. I mean, people always say that, but there are folks that I still work with now that I was their buyer at Amazon in, 2006, 2007, setting all their stuff up in the digital catalog. And that was pretty fun. We had a lot of try and fails. I remember we didn't really know what we would be able to ship to consumers' homes, like what would make it on the trucks. And so I still remember, there was this guy, Tim Blakowski, I think he might be at Henkel now, I can't remember, but he was at Unilever. We were going to sell olive oil in a gallon. And we were like, will it make it? Can it go on the conveyor belt? Like, what do we do? So I called my friend in supply chain. I'm like, can we ship this? Like, will it work? And he's like, I don't know, meet me in the parking garage. So we go down in the parking garage. It's me and him and the gallon of olive oil, and we threw it across the parking garage. And we were like, did it break? Nope, it didn't break. Okay, we're good. And that was what we used to call a drop test, to see if it would make it on the trucks. So we sold a gallon of olive oil. It was total crap, of course, because it's heavy and cheap. But yeah, that's where I kind of got my career start. I worked at Amazon for 10 years. I had a number of different roles there. When I left, I was a category leader for hardlines, softlines, and consumables for Amazon Canada. We launched 15 product categories in Canada. I ran the Prime program there.
Oh, really quick, did you know Darcy Meyer then over at Jack?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I just caught up with her the other day. So it's funny, the overlap. So at Perigo, right, I was working with Darcy to launch in Amazon Canada because we had infant formula, a slew of other things. Oh, too cool. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. I do know Darcy. She worked for a colleague of mine. We grew the Canada team from like 25 people to close to 200 at the time that I left. It was a really, really fun experience. But before that, I did all kinds of other things at Amazon. I launched the price matching software. I wrote the original business requirements for that, and launched that thing and stayed a subject matter expert and trained teams on it for a long time. I helped build their negotiations training. And I participated in that and led some case studies there.
So really quick, I'm going to keep interrupting as we go here because this is incredibly cool. So the annual vendor negotiations, like when I'm on the vendor side, I'm completely blown away at how good the negotiators, the vendor managers are, even at a young age.
Yeah. They're well trained. I mean, Amazon used to use ScottWorks in the early days as an external company that would come in and train, but they just really needed something bespoke. And so they worked with a lot of retail leaders like myself to pull together a curriculum. And we had 4 levels of negotiations training inside Amazon. And
so we should do another podcast just on AVN.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. It's that time of year and we're gearing up and we do lots of workshops and consults on that. It's kind of my favorite thing to talk about. Like the strategy of how do you find a win-win, right? Like how do you close a mutually successful negotiation? Because it's totally possible and everyone should feel empowered that is accessible to them.
Awesome. All right. And I keep interrupting you. I'm that we haven't overlapped more just blows my mind because we have so many mutual connections. And anyways, I'll let you keep rolling. So you're at Amazon. It's now I
did lots of things there. It was a really fun ride. I left in 2015 and I went out on my own and did some independent consulting for a while. Melissa Burdick and I were briefly business partners. We launched an e-commerce consultancy called Leigh and Burdick and worked on a few projects together there. And then I joined my now ex-husband at IdeoClick, and we ran IdeoClick for 4 years and grew that to a nice size, had a good book of clients there. I left there, I guess it's like 3 or 4 years ago now, and started a Loom Group. And at a Loom Group, we focus on, I guess you could call us an education partner. We develop and deliver customized content-driven digital immersions for managers, senior leaders, executives. So we're, the biggest question we get asked from clients is, and we mainly work with pretty large brands, holding companies, some retailers, is how do we set ourselves up for success in digital commerce? What are we missing? Like, what are all the companies doing well? And how can we drive more success? And it's not a one size fits all answer. So sometimes it's an exercise of, taking the leadership through some programming to help them identify where their biggest opportunities are. And sometimes it's a little more teaching and instructive, like in information sharing about what are some of the best practices in the space? How are other companies looking at this? How do you really think about a strategy? But I think what we find most often is that, traditionally, I mean, this is like an oversimplification probably, but most consumer brands are set up for an analog world where they're executing a plan and it's kind of set in and forget it for the year, right? Like you have a planogram, you decide your promotional plans for the year. And then you just kind of run that business for the year. And that really allows within the company different departments to operate really independently from one another. They need to come together for this planning process. And maybe, a few other times throughout the year, but there's not a real fabric there between the different departments in an organization. And digital commerce requires fabric because it's always on. You might have a plan and then it changes, or the shopper changes, or the competitive landscape changes because there's an infinite shelf, or now with retail media, the activities of competitors on retail media changes, or the retail media platform changes, and there's new technologies and new capabilities available. So it just requires this really nimble, always on approach. And I think that's super hard for a lot of companies because they're not organized that way. They're not incentivized and metriced that way. And it just requires a lot of collaboration. So that's really where we come in. We develop customized workshops to kind of help connect some of these teams, help them action plan together using digital commerce as a catalyst for that, and helping them figure out how to connect more dots.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I really, once we got reconnected, I wanted to kind of jump into this because it's a huge need. All I do is talk to brands all day, every day. It's of all sizes, but, having come from large corporate America, Pfizer, then Perrigo, and the amount of volume they were doing, but still, you're right, analog. There was the planogram. You had to gear up for planogram reset, selling in, but I remember setting up Amazon as an account, right? Cold calling and then randomly getting connected and setting up his account. I put my first word into Salesforce, and they were like, way to go. You're the first one to sell on this product. And they're like, what is your initial order? I was like, 1 case.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And it was this idea that, traditionally all the work went in up front. And then you're right. It was kind of like set it, forget it. It was rolling. Right. And then with digital, especially with Amazon and the other marketplaces now as well, the easiest thing is getting the product up on the platform. You just upload a new item setup form and it's up there. Then all the hard work starts. And that's where I think you're right. It's completely upended how multiple departments, especially if you're in, the CPG space or health and personal care, where you've got regulatory affairs involved, where it's not this one time was, set it, forget it. I'm optimizing that detail page on a quarterly basis. And it's
I think you can waste a lot of money, and especially now that the provider network is so, there's so many providers, it's super fragmented. And by providers, I mean vendors that'll help with different areas of digital commerce. You can waste a lot of money. And I think it's, a classic example is, okay, well, we have this big new product launch ready to go. We launch, we're in stock, the product page isn't ready yet, or we're running the retail media and the product's not in stock yet, or, the product just ran out of stock, or we just had to do a big price match and we ran out of stock, or we just had to do a big price match and now it's not profitable for the retailer. It doesn't meet profitability thresholds for retail media. So the ads aren't running. So it's it just requires this kind of always on collaboration and partnership within organizations, cross department. It's cross functional. And so I think that's new. And those are new capabilities. I mean, if you look at the old and new responsibilities in an analog world, the retailer took a lot of the responsibility for curating the shelf and in-store, executing in-store marketing, and, even and things like retailer profitability, so retailer's responsibility, content, all of that. And now a lot of that is the responsibility of the brand in the digital commerce world. So there's this big responsibility shifts. And for brands, those are often new capabilities, new technologies, new skills, new process, and they're learning. They're on a learning journey for how to have that be really successful. I think you marry that with how digital commerce, has created a very low barrier to entry for new brands, and some of the established brands are feeling a lot of pressure, right, to figure it out and to get it right and to make it profitable. I think some of them got on the bandwagon really early and drove a lot of growth in e-commerce, but it's not maybe sustainable growth. So now they're trying to solve that problem. But I think when you look at what makes organizations successful in digital commerce, it's not just org structure, it's so many things. I mean, the org structure is a big piece of it. I think up until the last 3 years, we mainly saw e-commerce teams kind of sitting in like a separate part of the company, or like they're their own org.
I was in IT. They put me in
Were
IT.
You?
Yeah.
I love
We
it.
built out a team in IT, and then we started making, it a profit center. It was like, IT's not a profit center. Like, where's all this money coming from? That's funny. You nailed it, though.
Yeah. I mean, or it would sit in just a strange place. Sometimes it's in sales. Occasionally it would be in marketing. And then there was a little cross-functional team that sort of sprouted up there because they needed to be able to move quickly. And then now that e-commerce is a bigger part of a lot of our clients' businesses, I think a lot of them are finding that model doesn't work as well anymore. There's some limitations to it. They need partnership from the rest of the organization. For example, they might now need to be working a little more upstream with product innovation to be able to, influence product design and make sure that it's fit for channel, make sure that it can be shipped profitably to a shopper's home, right? As opposed to being designed for a physical shelf. And I think that's a lot harder when you're parked over here on an island. And so a lot of companies have started democratizing the function and putting it inside of companies. Profitero does a great report every year called the Organizational Benchmarking Report that kind of reports on how many companies are organized in all these different ways, but they're also seeing this shift toward a democratized function where the team's not sitting alone anymore. They're moving marketing into marketing and supply chain into supply chain. And I think like that's requiring a lot of these teams to really work together. Another thing we're seeing is that a lot of the folks that grew up on the digital team, now they're having to learn new skills about like negotiating and evangelizing inside of an organization and operating inside of a big company. And those are new skills too for people who, grow up being able to move really fast and make autonomous decisions. And now those decisions are so much bigger and there's so many more people involved.
It's so funny you say that. I've had a bunch of those conversations just over the past 4 to 6 months. So there's finally one of the things that I found is if we do a little timeline is as the pandemic hit, there's a very small, like you're saying, very small group of people that actually knew digital and understood it because they were the ones that were, the groundbreakers, the risk takers, and they're over off in the corner doing something that's going to be disruptive someday, just mildly, but barely a rounding error. The pandemic hits and everybody rushes to LinkedIn and they update their title by putting a digital in front of it, right? So
or e-commerce, yeah.
Yes, marketing analyst, digital marketing analyst, e-commerce marketing analyst, whatever it might be. And so what looked like, because all of a sudden we needed 8,000 new jobs in digital. That's what the demand looked like. And so everybody just updated it, but that didn't mean that they actually learned it. And so there's a big group of people thrown into jobs, and hey, more power to them. All you did was put that in front and you were getting a 25% pay bump at a new company. And then as we've seen over the past year, organizations, as they're trying to figure out what you're talking about, they've started to trim that out. I think they're cutting a little too deep right now. But then kind of what you're saying is the people that have stuck around, they really understand it. Yeah, their complaint is exactly what you were just saying, which is, I can't just run and do it anymore. I find myself having to be an evangelist. I have to be going around trying to get everybody on board with this idea because I used to just work with my team. And now I have to go to external procurement because I need to onboard this new vendor quickly. And I need to explain to them why they don't have a Dun & Bradstreet number, right? I have to go to the marketing team that I never have to, the regulatory affairs team, and they're evangelizing something and they're just, it's slowing them down, but they realize they have to do it. But I see sometimes they're getting burned out. Their passion for the pace of it has changed. The interesting thing is I try to tell them is this is happening everywhere right now. Unless you're going to a startup, which a lot of them, if you've been in corporate America for 15 to 20 years, you're usually not going to a startup. Some people do. Usually they want to go, raise up a level by staying in the corporate setting. But they're just exasperated right now. It's funny that you bring that up. It is a trend that's you got to be an evangelist instead of executor. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's new skills. It's new skills and it's building new relationships. Those aren't the individuals in your company or the teams in your company that maybe you've needed to work with in the past. So you have to build those relationships. And I think that's where we try to play, is like through the workshops, kind of bringing together some of the groups that need to be brought together and helping foster some of those relationships, because that's how you get things done. But I think it's not even just about e-commerce. It's the shopper is digital first, and the shopper. So because the shopper is digital first, a consumer brand's route to market is starting to look really different than it used to. And so it's a larger digital transformation, I think, than just, figuring out how to sell well on Amazon, which is kind of what it used to be. Now it's like, if you look at, how we used to do shopper research, it was focus groups. And now we're doing social listening, and we're running and observing Reddit and discourse communities, and looking at social media feedback and, product development. Like I said, you were designing product for success on the physical shelf, and now you're designing maybe to optimize delivery economics and product integrity during the delivery. You can look at every functional area this way. Like marketing looks really different. Even loyalty drivers are a lot different, than they were in kind of a primarily analog world. You used to be looking at loyalty programs and a lot of heavily leaning on sales associates and in-person sampling. And now it's like online subscriptions and auto replenishment and digital loyalty programs. And how do you figure out how to do online sampling? So I think we're looking at a less linear route to market and a more chaotic route to market. And that's super disruptive, I think, for a lot of companies and they're trying to figure it out. And I think it's fun. I think it's fun being able to work with companies that are in the middle of change.
You're in an awesome spot, because there are so many companies, and you see it holistically, right? You're not coming in, we're going to optimize your sales and marketing team for digital. We're going to optimize your content team. It's the holistic view. I was just chuckling when you were saying you have to have all these new relationships. So at Perigo, we had infant formula, and they redid the case packer for the infant formula just to be wraparound, which if it's a wraparound, you don't get the strengths of the flutes in the corrugate. And so right. We didn't pass the drop test for, it's funny, I wish I would have had you doing the drop test, but they had to send it to, this is in like 2016. They had to send it out. They were more
sophisticated then.
Yeah, they had to send it out to drop testing. And it's just like every time it just busted open, like every single time. And these are the things that we need to bring in and just, have that education, the connection around, hey, when you're thinking about the package engineering, when you are thinking about this, think about it a different way. I know that wraparound case packer, it saves you, $100,000 a year on corrugate and how it does it in labor, but it costs us $2.5 million in online sales because we can't ship it or we have to
Exactly. And it's helping. I think it's really working with some of these leaders to think about, how do you position that as a business case within your organization, right? And particularly on the digital side, if folks grew up there, some of them might not have experience doing that. And so how do you really think through, like, okay, who needs to be involved? Like who, what
they've never thought about this before. They never had to.
No. Right? But these are learnable skills, right? Yeah. And I think they're super transferable skills as well. So, these, going through this exercise, I think digital folks going through, the exercise of putting together a business case internally and championing it and figuring out who needs to be involved and what metrics they're going to care about. That's real growth right there. And those are super transferable skills and make them stronger future leaders. We're starting to see something interesting, which is that some of the team members who grew up in digital are now starting to work in other areas of the company, taking over maybe like a larger brick and mortar account or maybe more of an omni player. And I think that's really exciting because that's showing that career progression, right? And it's showing that those organizations are embracing digital. If you've got someone who used to run Amazon and now they're running, Target or Walmart omni, I think that's pretty exciting. For a long time, we heard from digital team members that they didn't feel like they had a lot of career mobility. They felt like they were on an island. And I think we're starting to see that change. And I think that's really exciting for people's careers.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It is. And I think we're finally getting there. It's just it's a fun thing to watch, right? And just, I mean, we've got a similar group of acquaintances and we've kind of grown up in this space now. It's just, I don't know, you hit mid-40s and you're reevaluating life as a whole. And it's cool to be in this spot and be constantly challenged and have friends around you that are moving in those spots and are being constantly challenged to do new things and being given credit where credit was due. Where for a long time there was, us sitting in the corner, doing the little Amazon
thankless job.
Yeah. And yes, the idea that Amazon wouldn't be a viable account. Well,
right.
You're generating tons of cash. It's all of a sudden, and it gets pulled back into sales. It's cool. Like, I'm pumped for it. Are there like big aha moments that brands, organizations, I shouldn't just say brands, I should say organizations as a whole have? Like when you step in there, like, is there like a number one thing where they're like, we didn't even think about that? Or in my opinion, it would probably be the organizational piece and how much connectivity is not there today. But I mean, I don't know what it might be.
I think they're aware of that. So it's less of an aha and it's more of like, I love the challenge of thinking about when we're doing, a learning series for a cross-functional team, like what are exactly the right activities that are going to force them to partner with each other so that they can practice doing it and build that muscle. But that's not usually the aha. I think some of the ahas are, well, the first, I would say there's like three and they're kind of in different areas. One is always innovation because they've been sort of left out in a lot of companies from the digital conversations. And so when they start to really think about the cost to deliver and delivery economics, I think that there's a big aha there in terms of, like we actually need to be, if they're not already, we need to really be running the numbers on a digital commerce, situation or in use case, that this is going to have to ship to a consumer's home and think about what the price point needs to be and pack size and things like that. So I think there's some big ahas there. I think some other ones are on retail media. We always get asked the question, like, what's the right budget and how do we think about budgeting? And my question back is always, well, what are your goals and what are you trying to accomplish on each of these platforms? And if the answer is, I don't know, then it's $0. Like no money, spend nothing. And in fact, if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, stop spending right now and take a second because it's not just like I think for a while you could say, oh, well, we're just going to take a percentage of our sales on Amazon and plug it into some ad tech providers, keyword bidding software and run some campaigns and we'll see some success. And you can probably still do that, but it'll be super inefficient. You have to really think about what you're trying to accomplish. Each platform has a slightly different shopper and a different competitive set. You might be protecting your brand on one and going after new households on another one, or maybe you're just trying to drive awareness on a third one because you're in 200 target test stores and you want to be in more of a national model. And so you're just trying to drive awareness. So it depends what you're trying to accomplish. And there's also a lot more than just obviously search marketing available to us now. We can take our data and marry it with the retailer's data in the cloud, and we can do all kinds of custom targeting. And, we can look at people that have lapsed from our brand, or we can look at our brand loyalists and we can segment them all these different ways. And so the capabilities are endless. And I think if you don't know what you're trying to do, what you want to accomplish, by platform, at least for the big ones, that's always a big aha. It's just kind of like, like we've been kind of on autopilot a little, maybe a little more than they'd like, I think. So
I think I'm just chuckling because they probably think you're going to come in and start talking about org, which I'm sure you do, but it's like, let's look at retail media. Oh, wait, what? No, let's not look because and we've been chatting. I've had Megan Caroon from Clear Data, who's built out a platform that helps large enterprise level brands understand exactly that. Because you're right, it is people I'm talking, it has been on autopilot because they haven't had time to get to it yet. And they know in a lot of cases, you can't just turn it off at a Walmart or an Amazon can't quite do that. Other retailers, maybe, I did a podcast with Lauren Levac from the Digital Shelf Institute and Nate Pinkston, and there's like over 600, maybe it was 700 retail media networks now. So yes, they have had an autopilot, but it is turn it off, right? If you don't have a strategy, like you totally nailed it. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? I don't know. Sales? Like, why? You're probably like, why are you asking me? Like, you have the answer. I don't have the answer. I'm asking you a legitimate question. Do you want awareness?
Seriously. Yeah. And I think retail media is such a great example. I mean, it's not, it's not the be all end all for all of our success with all of our retail customers, but I think it is such a great example because it's such a shared responsibility in an organization. I mean, we just did a share group yesterday with Digital Shelf Institute with Lauren, and we had
yesterday? Awesome.
Yeah, we just did one on retail media budgeting, and it was interesting. I mean, the ownership of the budget for retail media can sit in 3 or 4 different places inside of an organization. And so then it's like, well, who gets to decide what the strategy is and who is measuring it? And so I think there are a lot of ahas around that because it's media, but it's also like kind of a sales and commercial trade sort of a program for a lot of retailers. So it's sometimes it's part of that JBP with the retailer. So maybe it lives there. So the ownership of it is a little distributed, I would say right now. And then, kind of going back to what are you trying to accomplish? What you're trying to accomplish is what you should be measuring. And it might be something different on the different platforms. And I know there's such an interest in being able to compare them all, but they're very difficult to compare. And especially if you're running different strategies, like you can't just look at ROI across all of them. Like if one of them is an awareness play, you're going to maybe want to look at something else. So I think that's can be a real challenge for brands in thinking through that and trying to bring all those disparate teams together to align on a strategy.
Yeah, is there a spot where you start? What does that normal engagement look like? Because I'm at this point where I just want to connect you with everybody that I run into at the enterprise level and be like, have Andrea come in and sit down and analyze what's going on and put together a workshop because it's desperately needed. It's desperately needed. And, corporate America, if you're internal, number one, you don't have enough time to drive the change that's needed. Number two, the others internally, especially at an executive team, aren't looking for you to do this. And they don't always necessarily believe that you know how to do this because it's not your job. So when you have the outside expert come in, everybody seems to listen. Right.
Yeah. Well, because I don't have a vested interest in the outcome. Like I'm not, as any external facilitator that comes in, I'm not special, but any external facilitator that comes in is not,
you are special. I am. You're doing something amazing. You are special. I wish I had you back in the day. I wish when I was at Perigo, I would have brought you in an instant to do exactly this, the entire executive team. And anyways, but and say like, listen, it's not coming from me. Like, listen to the.
Yeah. And we create, we'll create a series of workshops to help them organize. So like what do we feel like is best? What does best in class look like for us? Let's define that. And then what are the gaps that we have to that? Is it people, process, capability, technology? We go through that exercise. Who's someone we really admired in this space? What do we feel like they're doing well or not well? We have some frameworks that we use to help illustrate that. And then do next action planning. So like, what can we accomplish in 3 to 6 months? What's going to happen later than that? And then coming back and like, how are we doing on these action plans? Some like accountability. We're doing something really cute for a workshop we're doing for a client. A workshop series in a couple of weeks where we do the kickoff in person, and then we have a couple webinars, and then we do the capstone in person, and we're having them mail themselves a postcard. So they write a postcard with like, what they're hoping to accomplish. And then we mail it to them right before the capstone. So there's a reminder of some goals that they had set for themselves and maybe a little bit of accountability there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've been picking your brain forever. I want to give you the opportunity. All I do is talk to brands. Any information I can impart on you, anything that's you're curious about that I might be hearing across the digital landscape?
Yeah. I mean, things that I'm super curious about right now, especially since we're going into negotiation season, is kind of how particularly Walmart and Target are positioning themselves and their retail media networks as part of, as part of the whole omni package. Because I think it's really, I mean, Amazon's pretty straightforward in that they're pure play. And if you invest in advertising, you get advertising. Or if you invest in retail media, you get retail media. It looks a little different across some of the other retailers. You get a little bit of retail media, but maybe you also get the end cap that you wanted and some other things. It's kind of difficult to pull apart, I think, what's digital commerce and what's not. And I think from a P&L perspective for some of our clients, that's really complicated. So curious if you're hearing some of that and what some of your clients are talking about. So that's something that I'm really interested in. And then something else that I'm really interested in is I've noticed a few big enterprise level brands kind of adopting new decision-making processes. One of the clients that we work with has brought in like a whole new framework for org and decision-making. It's not specific to digital commerce. It's just like a new way of working. Like, how are we going to change and evolve and be more nimble? And then I can't remember who it was on LinkedIn. I saw the other day that they were announcing that they did a public announcement that they were adopting this new kind of framework for decision-making and, reducing layers and redundancies, but not like downsizing, more just like in decision-making, right? And so I'm curious if you're hearing that from other brands, and if that's more than 2 data points, sometimes kind of feels like a movement, which is exciting.
Yeah. So we'll tackle the second one first. Yes, including in my old category. And I think the jury is still out. There's a lot of apprehension internally because there were jobs eliminated in a lot of these cases. And they were a middle management layer. And the issue is a lot of those were digital people who hadn't made it to an executive team layer yet. And so they've been removed. And so there's this weird scramble for help. And they're looking then for an agency to come in and kind of solve the problem, which in some cases they can do, and a lot they can't replace the experience that was there.
Right.
Now, shaking up the traditional business model, it's going to be a great case study, right? Because large organizations do get bloated in the middle, right? Tons of middle management. And this was a unique way of not doing multiple rounds, but one big, we're going to swipe this out. And then we're going to not just swipe it out to swipe it out, but give different, you're right, change how decisions are made. Yeah, it's out there. I don't know how it's going to work out. I
mean, you had mentioned you felt like companies had cut a little too deep. So it's like, it feels like 3 to 5 years ago, these companies, these brands could not hire enough digital talent. Agencies too. Right. We work with like Publicis and IPG and stuff. And they could not hire enough digital talent. And now it seems like they're scaling some of those teams back. Well, I think one thing that they're realizing is it's teachable. There's enough content out there, and a lot of the vendor community will teach their tools and services for free. And even the retailers have their own training programs now. So it's like, I think they're realizing it's teachable, and they can teach other parts of the organization to do the work. They don't need redundancy. Maybe they felt like they had redundancy.
Yeah, I think they overhired, and I think they're realizing that in this. They did a couple of things. They overhired in 2 areas. Well, one, overhiring, which was just, I don't know the people I need, so I don't want to be left behind. And I don't want to be the reason, that I'm going to keep hiring until they say stop hiring, as long as they give me the money, so that I make sure I have the people for this huge, moves to digital. And then they also added on every vendor and every vendor's, cousin and brother's cousin's third cousin on as a vendor. And those tech stacks got really bloated. And so we're seeing those 2 things trim out. And I think they're trying to see how far they can compress it. And at the same time, they're seeing a lot of the actual tech vendors, the cream of the crop, the ones that were post Series A, they're profitable. Anybody could have started a tech company 3 years ago, right? That's pretty straightforward. You just asked for money and said you're doing something crazy, and people threw it at you. Well, now we have these.
It's so true.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that was just crazy. And then what's happened now is the people who weren't working have been weeded out. And with AI and machine learning, the technology's come a long way in just a year, a long way. And so there's this, hey, I don't want to trim. I'm going to trim as much as I can, see how much the new tech can help me out, and then I'll hire back. That's kind of where I've seen that's happened across the hiring landscape. But yeah, I think they did cut a little bit too deep.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to trim that just destroys morale across the board. Smaller organizations, it didn't matter. They're still working with 7 people, running $100 million business with 7 people. But they're trying to get on store shelf. That's the tough part, is they're really, really trying to get on store shelf. And this is where I think big, large, established brands, we always hear like, oh, these new little brands, these ankle biters turn into being these big ones. They end up getting acquired. Right now, this move back to store shelf by a lot of shoppers, the amount of money being spent online is shrinking, and the number of people buying is shrinking. They have a chance to win. Again, it's one of the reasons I love getting reconnected with you, is they need this direction on the organizational design, the interaction, the strategy. How does our team adapt to this new way? And oh, by the way, this new way is going to be different 6 months from now. And it's going to be different 6 months from then. It's going to be different. Mm-hmm. E-commerce digital has completely changed how businesses need to handle it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think what you're doing is fantastic. Now, what was the other question? Oh, Target.
JBPs, just like, what are some of the things you're hearing this year? What are any trends from some of the omni retailers?
They want everything to work like Amazon. Put $1 in, I get $1 out. And that doesn't happen with Walmart. It doesn't necessarily happen with Target. Is just weird to deal with. It's outside of everybody. They're like, hey, we're just Target and we're going to be Target. Don't want to be here? Fine. Don't be here. We don't care. It's very interesting. But on the Walmart side, if we tackle that one first, the push for retail media dollars, nobody's ever minded doing that with Walmart, except for on the digital side when they're not growing.
Yeah.
And if you're in a traditional grocery run, all in with Walmart, do it. If you're outside of the traditional grocery run and that CPG, it could be household cleaning, that stuff, it's really the growth there is not what brands were hoping for. And every brand is hoping for Walmart to win. At Walmart.com, everyone is. They want somebody to go head to head against Amazon and, have another person in that space. And if Walmart can be that partner, and if they can nail down retail media and they can forget about everybody forgets that Amazon forgot about the profits at the beginning, right? And Walmart.
Oh yeah, they got a break. I mean, it's really. I think there's a whole story there, and Jason Del Rey wrote a great book about it. Kind of this Amazon versus Walmart compare and contrast. He's a reporter formerly for Vox Media, but he. In the beginning years, Amazon was treated like a tech stock, and Walmart has always been treated like a retailer, which, I mean, those are completely different responsibilities to shareholders, right? Yeah. Like Amazon got like a free pass to lose money for years and years, and Walmart doesn't get that free pass. And Walmart has still figured out how to grow e-commerce, which I think is pretty incredible.
Right. Can you imagine if they didn't have to post the earnings? Like if they just got the free pass, they did spend like $3 billion on Jet. That's a whole.
Yeah. And then they got a little acquisition happy with Mark Lore and kind of unwound a lot of that. But I bet they learned a lot. I mean,
I think Jet was just about gone, and Mark, wow, sold it.
I mean, that's just a whole facet. You could do a whole podcast on that series of events.
Yeah, it was very, very interesting. The old Jet headquarters. I don't know if you ever went to the original ones. There was like below, like it was like at the second floor. There's a pizza shop. It's like it was a really weird setup. You're just like walking across the street and you go up some stairs and there's just a bunch of people pounding on keyboards. And like, this is Jet headquarters. Like, anyway, it was interesting before they moved and then before they got acquired. So I see that we're just about at time here. I do really appreciate jumping on today and lending us and the community some of your time. As always, we wish you the best and make sure I'm sending people over your way for sure. No, this has been fun. I think we do need to do a follow-up if you're open to it on AVNs. I think
I would love to talk about AVN. We have a framework that's very proven and super successful, and I'd be happy to talk through it and share that with your listeners.
And then people just, for that, you do a workshop on that too?
Yeah, we do a workshop. It's usually about an hour and a half, or sometimes it's a 2 or 3 part series, or maybe more if we're doing like global teams and trying to get like a bunch of different markets, but it's a pretty quick one. And we walk through, it's a workshop walking through a framework of like preparing to negotiate, how to identifying your leverage points and your profit killers, and following the process. And then, we can get pretty Amazon specific on it in terms of like, who's your opponent and how are they measured? And, how do we really think about a collaborative negotiation? Because that's really what it's about. I subscribe to interest-based negotiations theory. So it's the more interest we put on the table, the more likely we are to have a mutually successful outcome and both win. But it's hard to do that when you're negotiating with a partner like Amazon, where the interactions are so limited. So it's like, what are the strategies to get as many interests on the table and ask for as many things as possible so that you can find some common ground? And it's totally possible. And, we have had a lot of clients be able to to go backwards on some terms and get some things reversed in exchange for other things that are a little bit more working dollars. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk about it.
Awesome. Well, let's find a time for that. And then we can rehash. I have like 19 other names I want to run by you. So the first part, again, will kind of be the recap, maybe of us just catching up on old friends that we didn't know we had. But thanks so much, Andrea. Thanks for everything you're doing for the network. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks, everybody, for listening in.
Thanks for having me, Aaron.